Hello again, everybody. I hope there's a lot of you out there. This is Jim Ransom with another session of poetry readings. I'll say up front that these are fairly straightforward poems, but that doesn't mean simple. Except for one, they are poems written by Kansas poets, including yours truly. And we've heard from most of these poets before. Our first poem today is short, but it's packed with a lot of things, such as attempted suicide, survival, redemption, and acceptance. Phew! That's quite a lot from one short poem, isn't it? The poem is called Praise Song, and it's by Lucille Clifton, who was once the Poet Laureate of Maryland. It's from the book that we've used before. It's called Poetry 180, and this is a group of poems that has been collected by Billy Collins as a part of an attempt that he has made to get poems into the high school curriculum around the country. And here it is, Praise Song. To my Aunt Blanche, who rolled from grass to driveway into the street one Sunday morning, I was 10. I had never seen a human woman hurl her basketball of a body into the traffic of the world. Praise to the drivers who stopped in time. Praise to the faith with which she rose after some moments, then slowly walked sighing back to her family. Praise to the arms which understood little or nothing of what it meant, but welcomed her in without judgment, accepting it all like children might, like God. Now that's a powerful poem in a very short format. I like that. I like that kind of poetry. Very concise, very compressed, but no complicated words that nobody understands. No complex poetic forms that you can't really appreciate on a first reading. No, but the poem itself is full of great images and great ideas. Our next poem today is another concisely constructed poem by a poet we all know, with a lot of things in it. It's by Ruth Maus, what's in this poem, if you want to look at it that way, is the effects on each other of two distant and disparate bodies. I'm speaking, of course, of heavenly bodies, the earth and the moon. And this poem is from Ruth's book we've seen before. It's called Valentine. Again, this is a very concise poem that's got a lot of things in it. It's called Moon Poem. The moon, like a stony hanger-on, pulls us like a suckling child. Its demands too impertinent to ignore, tied in, tide out. Light on, light out. And always look up. I think that's a very neat poem by Ruth, and I'm glad to be able to read it to you. As you can see, I'm focusing on short poems which are perhaps more complex than they seem at first glance. The next poem is by Melissa Fite Johnson, and you may remember her. I think we had her as recently as last month. She's a high school English teacher at Pittsburgh, Kansas. And I think I introduced her last time by saying that she lives with her husband and a dog and some chickens. But of course, there's always the classroom full of kids. In this poem, which I'm going to read, which is called Reading a 5-year-old issue of Vanity Fair, she gives us an example of the irony which bubbles up when you already know what happened to some of the characters 5 years later. Vanity Fair, in spite of its pretensions, is full of people whose lives really don't turn out like Vanity Fair expects them to. So here is from Melissa's book, the poem Reading a 5-year-old issue of Vanity Fair. The cover actress, wearing a striped bikini and floppy hat, tells her interviewer over iced teas and salads how grateful she is for her father's remission. She will lose him in 2 years. The actor photographed on page 80 chasing his model wife and 3 kids around the gazebo in their backyard, which he built, will sleep with the nanny. No one will remember that year's It Girl, the It Girl, after a series of box office flops, or even the 1963 Oscar winner, memorialized in this issue. Each page features a new face looking up at me with such hope. I cannot cut new lines into their poems or even warn them what's coming. That's a poem full of irony. And don't we all wish that we might know what's becoming of us in 5 years? Actually, most of us would be far better off if we didn't know that far into the future. Now, the final poem today is going to be one of mine, written several years ago about a good friend of ours, that is, of mine and Marcia's. She was perhaps my wife's best friend, and unfortunately she's currently under hospice care. At the time of this poem, she had just had a heart valve replaced, and after the poem and prior to the poem, she worked for many years for a service organization where she cared for sick and elderly people. It was a stressful job, but she loved helping people out, and she stuck with it long after most people would have retired. And in fact, it wasn't really until she was confined to bed herself that she had to quit this job. If you have a copy of this book, Immortal Prairie, sorry about the light flashes. The poem is on page 42, and I'll have to find it myself here before I can read it. This poem is called For Deacon Annie. Can clever surgeons heal a heart so full of love for all these sweet souls locked in gnarled and sickened bodies you don't see when in your rounds you clasp them to yourself? Can a new valve improve the working of your lover's heart, blessing the afflicted with a balm more potent than a knife? Your open heart's beyond the surgeon's scope, the systoles of love sent from your heart alone will surge beyond the limits of the flesh and bone. That's the poem for Deacon Annie. And that's it for this week. As is often the case, I have no idea what will come next week. But I do know I'll be reading some longer poems this week. At least that's the job I've cut out for myself. Who knows what I'll find that you might find worthwhile and entertaining. Until next week, stay healthy, and let's hope for nice spring weather wherever you are. And I think that we may have some coming. It's going to be April by then, and who knows what April will bring. All right, goodbye now, and I hope you have a wonderful week in front of you.